Good afternoon, everybody. Can I do it twice? Can I get everyone quiet? Thank you so much, and thanks so much to everybody for coming this afternoon. This really is an exciting time because we have folks running for government that will be making decisions about our futures, and we have the opportunity today to listen and begin to understand what they are thinking about the aging issues. I'm Barbara Riley, and I am the chair of the Ohio Aging Advocacy Coalition. We're a pretty new group, and I will tell you a little more about us, but we are very interested in making sure that Ohio governing bodies know what elders need. They know what seniors like ourselves are interested in and need to have in order to be able to age and have well-being where we choose to do that. I want to thank today especially Westminster Thurber, Ohio Living Westminster Thurber, for allowing us to use this space. It's fantastic space, and we are thrilled to be here. We also have supporting organizations who, for the most part, represent providers of senior services, and they are the ones who stood up and said, you know, we really think it's time that seniors themselves have a voice. And so we began making steps forward on that. You see them referenced on this behind me, but those organizations include Leading Age Ohio, the Ohio Association of Area Agencies on Aging, the Ohio Healthcare Association, the Assisted Living Association of Ohio, the Ohio Council for Home Care and Hospice, the Ohio Association of Senior Centers, and the Meals on Wheels Association of Ohio. So many thanks to all of them for really putting forward the resources to allow us to get this movement up and running. As well as those of us here today, we also have over 20 watch parties going on out there across Ohio. So it isn't only us who are hearing and able to gain the benefit of this conversation, but it is also those in Ohio who have organized watch parties. They're watching on Facebook. And in addition to that, any individual who was following us on Facebook would also have the opportunity to do it at home in their own homes. Closed captioning is available, and if anyone here needs it, it is on this screen to my left. So in case the Ohio Aging Advocacy Coalition is new to you, I really want to tell you just a little bit about why we exist and why we are here today and plan to be here for a long time to come. I previously was the Director of Aging for the state of Ohio, and it occurred to me as I had that position and listened to an awful lot of people come and talk to me about things they cared about, they were concerned about, that I very rarely heard from seniors themselves. And you know, it's us who know what we need and how to get the services that we really need in order to stay where we choose to stay. And so when the opportunity presented itself to form an organization that would actually be seniors speaking for seniors and caregivers speaking sometimes for their seniors, then that just seemed like the perfect place to be going. So here we are, we're starting. And I want to share just a couple of things. Now, AARP is also an organization that is largely represented by seniors, but they focus their attention at the national level. And there is so much that can happen and does happen at the state level that I really wanted us to focus there. So last year, we had our Ohio legislature pass the Ohio Caregiving Act. And that's an act that ensures that caregivers have the information and the training they need to bring a loved one home from the hospital before that person is discharged. Think about having, you know, nowadays we don't keep people very long in the hospital, we send them home. And if you come home and no one can provide you that assistance, you're really in a very difficult position. So we know that that act has passed and is being implemented. And the Ohio senior community helped make that happen. We also have had a great increase in the resources being directed to adult protective services, so that seniors who have been victims of abuse, neglect, even self-neglect or fraud, now have a better opportunity to get attention from the county folks where they live to be able to help resolve the issues with them. So that's been a large step forward. The state was moving all seniors onto managed care that received Medicaid. And we were very concerned about whether managed care was prepared to deal with all of us as individuals needing very special types of care in many instances. And we were able to, and the coalition worked hard on this, we were able to postpone that and to have a group organized that would provide input into whether or not it's a good idea, and if so, how it needs to be done. So those are some past accomplishments, but the real thing that's important right now is the future. And we are looking, we now have an Ohio House Committee on Aging and Long-Term Services, and that committee has the opportunity to, again, hear directly from us and begin to write legislation and to support legislation that has a positive impact. In addition to that, we have an Alzheimer's task force that has done its work and will be also suggesting legislation, another opportunity for us to be able to make a difference. There's obviously an assisted, well, not obviously, there is an assisted living work group as well, similar sets of circumstances. The thing that is kind of obvious is the budget process. We will be entering that budget process in about January. The state departments are already pulling their budgets together. And budgeting quite often is the very thing that influences the policy that affects us as seniors. That adult protective services that I referenced, it was because we were able to get more dollars in the budget that we're able to have improved services. So we really are making progress, but there's lots to be done, and lots that hasn't bubbled up yet that we know will. So the purpose of the coalition, of the Ohio Aging Advocacy Coalition, is to just make sure that our voices are heard. And the disability community uses a phrase that I think is particularly appropriate: nothing about us without us. We need to be at the table when decisions are being made. So that's a little about the Ohio Aging Advocacy Coalition. Now I'd like to tell you what our ground rules are for today. Some of them are rules that apply to those of us here. Some of them are the candidates and how we're dealing with the conversation we'll be having with them. First off, I'm afraid there are no pictures to be taken other than our photographer is over here, and you'll be able to see pictures on the Facebook page for us. In addition to that, this is being filmed live, being shown live on Facebook, and you'll be able, when you go home, to put it back on and watch it all over again, or have a friend perhaps join you to watch it. So that's a piece that we are excited about, that this will be out there for a long, long time to come. Due to time constraints, we're not able to actually take questions that you'll be able to raise your hand and ask a question. You have cards at your place, and if you have any questions that you feel are not addressed by the candidates, we will collect them at the end of both candidates having their opportunity to participate, and we will be providing those to them. And if we receive answers and when we get any feedback from them, we will post that on the Facebook page as well. So your questions will be given to the candidates, and our hope is that they will be answered as well. We will not have an actual break. And again, this is, as you might imagine, the candidates are going from place to place to place to place. So we won't actually have a break between them, but they will be up here one at a time. And for the few moments while we exchange who it is, we will be showing a short video from age-friendly Columbus, and it's an excellent video, and we have a little extra surprise to keep us moving and feeling energized. And so please stay in your seats during that time. The candidates have been, we will be asking the exact same questions of each of the candidates. So you will get to hear each one's issue and how they intend to address it. And in addition to that, we are timing them because we have enough questions that we figure they can answer in 4 minutes. So I will have to figure out how to gracefully interrupt them if they just keep on going. So let's see. I don't think I've missed anything that's too important here. So now we will turn to our candidates themselves. So our first candidate is the Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Ms. Betty Sutton. She's raised in Barberton and received her law degree. She has served in Congress. She was there from 2006 until 2012, where she sponsored legislation including, and you might remember this, cash for clunkers. That was a biggie. Was actually quite important at the time. She's also worked on behalf of veterans benefits, funding for firefighters and first responders, and the American Jobs First initiative. She lives in Copley, Ohio, with her husband and 2 rescue dogs. And since I have a rescue dog, I'm very sympathetic to that. Please join us. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Nice to see you. So as I said, we will be doing the same questions for each candidate, and they are prepared questions, and I'm going to read them so that I'm certain that I ask them the same way for both candidates. So the first, and would you prefer Ms. Sutton, or do you have a
You can
preference?
call me Betty.
Oh, thank you. You can call me Barbara. Okay, our first one deals with workforce. I'm sure you're aware that the need for paid caregivers is great in Ohio. And the first question today has to do with them and the fact that Ohio's population is rapidly aging. It's well documented that there is a shortage of paid caregivers today. It's equally well documented that in the coming years, the ratio of people to caregivers, of caregivers to seniors, will continue to shrink. What ideas do you have to address the challenge? For example, encouraging Ohioans to make caregiving their career, or harnessing technology to relieve the caregiving workload?
Well, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here today. I'm delighted to be with you. For all of you who are here, thank you for joining us, and for those who might be watching elsewhere, thank you as well. I am Betty Sutton, and I appreciate the question. It's extraordinarily important. I'm the running mate of Rich Cordray, and Rich and I know how important it is that we not only help our seniors live longer, but they live better. And we are dedicated to doing that. We've certainly done that throughout the course of our lives, and this is going to be no exception should we have the great honor and privilege to serve as your governor and lieutenant governor. So with respect to caregivers and making sure that we have the workforce that we need, the quality, caring, compassionate, motivated, and mission-driven, I would argue, caregivers, Rich and I have a workforce development plan that we would actually utilize some of the federal dollars that come into Ohio to help build the workforce that we need to treat our seniors with dignity and respect after a lifetime of earning it. And whether you work in the home or out of the home, you have earned the right in Ohio to retire with respect and dignity. In fact, we have a program that we are going to establish called Retire as a Buckeye. And we think this should be a state not only that you can live and raise a family and provide for a good life for them, but you also ought to retire with some security and some dignity. And that would help us. The Retire as a Buckeye program certainly would. It's important that we have a range of caregiving options for people, because not everybody is going to need exactly the same thing. So along with that workforce development program, we also have a healthcare program that we are going to put in place called Reducing Costs and Reliable Coverage. And that aims at making sure that, one, people have access to the coverage they need when they need it, and that they can access it when they need it. It also means that we're going to focus on preventative care, right? And also primary care, so that we get better outcomes. We're also going to squeeze out some of the costs that are associated with healthcare today. You know, I am not new to this. As a member of Congress, I voted to try and get Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices for seniors. I still don't understand why that isn't happening. Something that we will continue to press for in our position, but we do think that it's important to have a health care plan that will work for all people, not just some. So there's a lot to build our workforce. There's a lot to do to drive out costs, and Rich Cordray and I are prepared to take every step we possibly can.
Thank you. The next one is provider capacity, somewhat related to the workforce issue. The second question pertains to ensuring options for care. As we age, we are likely to need more help to continue living life the best we can. In a moment, we'll talk about the family caregiving side. But as more Ohioans age or develop disabilities, we need more services, and many of us will need formal long-term services and supports. How would you suggest that the state build, fund, and maintain a full array of high-quality options so that seniors have the ability to choose the services that will best meet their needs in the most cost-effective manner?
Well, I appreciate this question as well. And as I mentioned a moment ago, we know, Rich and I, that most seniors want to stay in their home or living independently as long as possible. And of course, that is understandable. And so we believe that we really do need to do a better job of care coordination. We need to do a better job of giving people a wide range of affordable housing in accessible communities, just like the one in which we sit today. So that, and focus more of our funding as well and resources on providing a wide array of caregiving options. So not every senior is going to require exactly the same kind of care and services. And this Retire as a Buckeye program that Rich and I are committed to putting in place would actually allow seniors to have a one-stop shop to access the various programs and services that might be right for them. We also think it's really important that the Department of Insurance in the state of Ohio work for you and be consumer friendly so that it's understandable. You know, I'm a lawyer and a person who has had the privilege to serve as a lawmaker, and I look at some of this stuff and trying to navigate it, and it's really way more complicated than it should be. So this Retire as a Buckeye program is going to be a really big, important part of that. But we also, again, have to build that workforce. And, you know, those jobs in healthcare and caregiving, they're really important. They're certainly important for those who need and are going to receive the services, but they're also a good way for somebody to use their life to help others in service, and so we think that we need to make that an attractive job for people to do and earn a good wage and living and benefits, and so we're going to work on that as well.
Thank you very much. Retire as a Buckeye. Well, that's an interesting concept because I'm afraid all I can picture is Brutus. Not real sure I want to look like Brutus, but a Buckeye's okay. Our next question is around informal caregivers. Let's talk about informal and family caregiving.
Yes.
An estimated 1.4 million Ohioans provide unpaid care to our parents, our spouses, or other loved ones. The value of the unpaid care in Ohio alone is estimated at $16.5 billion a year. Informal caregivers are indeed our hidden gems. We don't have the data on them as we do for the paid services, but we do know that they're critically important. With our growing aging population, What thoughts do you have about how we can best support families and those informal caregivers who provide actually the majority of care?
And we have to do much better than we are right now. We need to expand services like respite care. We need to provide more options, as I said, for home health care to come in to supplement. We need to do a better job of allowing more family members to be a part of that care coordination. And Rich and I also believe that we should have a tax credit to help those who are providing that in-home care. I happen to be a blessed person who is the youngest of 6 kids. And I know I'm a survivor too, right? 4 older brothers, let me just say. You know, my mother, I have the great fortune of having with me to this day. She is 90 years old, and she brightens every day that I have. And my parents, my father I lost a while ago, but my parents set this example, and I think it's really important because as I grew up, we had both my grandfather live with us from my father's side, and then my mother's mom lived with us, and so I saw the beauty and the benefit and the exchange that comes with having that experience. And I also saw some of the struggles that, you know, when you're trying to work and you're trying to deal with all of the implications, it's a lot. So we have to do everything that we can to make, as I say, the lives of all involved better. And I believe that we can do that when we work together with the folks in this room, with the people who are the experts, the ones who are working with our seniors day in and day out, and frankly, with people like my mom and me and others who have had these experiences of helping different family members in different directions over time. I think that that's really important insight to bring to bear. So we are very well aware of the benefits that people give, and also, of course, the things that they receive. I want to say one thing about my running mate, Rich Cordray. You know, Rich is the son of 2 people who worked with the developmentally disabled. His father was born blind, but nonetheless used his life for service. His mother was a teacher and a social worker. And she actually started the first foster grandparents program in this state. And so that should tell you a little bit also about who he is and how we value our seniors and our population as a great asset to this state.
Thank you. Let's go on to protection for seniors. And I had mentioned to the group earlier that we have seen an increase in funding for that, but we also know that as more Ohioans age and the percentage of people with dementia and other disabilities increases, there are more incidents of abuse, neglect, and exploitation committed by some bad actors against Ohioans, and those could increase with our increasing numbers. What measures do you feel are needed to expand our protection efforts and use adult protection services and other resources?
Yeah, all of these things are interrelated, and we have to make sure that we're investing in the right things. And frankly, adult protective services is the state's response to dealing with elder abuse. Well, we need to do more, because as more folks are getting up there in years, there's more opportunity for exploitation. So adult protective services, while they get some funding from the state, they don't get enough. They don't get enough to get the job done on behalf of our seniors. And Rich and I are going to increase the funding for adult protective services. And frankly, because what happens as well is it's fiscally responsible. It makes sense from a money perspective, because when you prevent neglect or you prevent abuse, it's less likely that somebody may end up in a nursing home, and a nursing home can be long-term care is far more expensive. So why aren't we investing in keeping our seniors happy and healthy and as vibrant as possible, as long as we possibly can, putting those resources into the front end and certainly making sure that they are not exploited or abused, at a minimum, is part of that. And so we are definitely going to beef that up and make sure that there is more financial help for fulfilling those responsibilities that the state has to fulfill.
Thank you. The next question focuses on Alzheimer's and dementia. 10% of the 65 and older population and 45% of those 85 and older have some form of dementia. Unless, as we hope will happen, there are advances in prevention and treatment, as Ohioans age, there's the potential for an increase yet again in the number of those individuals. This issue is receiving greater attention every day. We've already talked about several subjects that are relevant for people with dementia and their caregivers, but we'd like to give you the opportunity to share additional thoughts about how we can support individuals being faced with a dementia diagnosis and their families.
Well, this is an extremely important subject, and there are some 220,000 Ohioans who are suffering from Alzheimer's even as we speak that we know of. And it is truly a silent epidemic. And we in this state, for some reason, Alzheimer's is obviously, and dementia are issues for those who are suffering, for those caregivers who are working with, especially family, with those who are experiencing these issues. But the state of Ohio is the only state that does not have a state health plan related to Alzheimer's, and that is unacceptable. I should say, doesn't have or isn't in the process of developing, because I believe there are some that are in the process of developing it. When Rich and I are governor and lieutenant governor, we are going to develop a plan to deal with Alzheimer's, and we're going to do it with experts like you and others. We're going to listen to people about the experiences that they are having, those who give care, those who are experiencing this within their families, and we're going to come up with a plan to deal with things immediately, as well as what we should be doing for 5 and 10 years out from now. And frankly, then we are going to take those things that we gather in the plan that we put on paper, and we're going to work with the state legislature, and frankly, these issues should be bipartisan. We should be able to find people to bring together to solve these issues and move us forward. And then we're going to translate them into public policy to give folks a peace of mind and to deal with this in the way that we should, as any public health issue should be confronted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question is care coordination, and I'd like to set that up just
Sure.
a little bit.
Please.
So, many individuals now, professionals, others are saying, particularly insurers, are saying that if we could only coordinate care more effectively, it would reduce our costs, it would be more productive for the individual, it would result in better health care, better condition for those of us who are aging. And Ohio has been moving a number of seniors who receive both Medicare and Medicaid onto managed care. And I think quite often people equate managed care with care coordination. They are not, one does not necessarily mean the other, but that is the approach in Ohio that we have taken. And as Ohio has moved forward, they have determined that they would prefer to have all of us who are older citizens who are eligible for Medicaid to receive our services through a managed care organization. They're studying the issue. I mentioned earlier that it had certainly been almost a foregone conclusion that that was happening whenever we went through the last budget process, but those who are advocates were able to really convince the state that it deserved time to be studied. And so that's what's happened. The General Assembly has a committee to take, and not just a committee of themselves, but a committee of citizens and professionals in the field of aging to study that issue. So now it might be your turn. And if it is your turn, What ideas do you have about how the system could better manage the care of those of us who are seniors without limiting our choice of providers or limiting access to necessary services, including the non-medical social service side of the equation, things like transportation and meals and personal support? So,
well, that's a big question.
Yep, it is.
I appreciate it. Well, first, let's begin with the end. We are well aware, and certainly I have had the experience and the record to support things like expanding Meals on Wheels. I was very honored when I was in Congress to repeatedly get the support of the Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. So these are not new items and new issues or new commitments that we make here today on this stage. There are too many, and frankly, one is too many seniors in Ohio who are worried about where their next meal may come from, or how they're going to deal with their chronic disease, how they're going to get to a doctor when they need to get to the doctor, how they're going to get to the specialist that they need to get to. So there are many things that we can do, and certainly we're going to look and see what comes out of the study that is already underway, and we will care about what those results are and appreciate that information. But there are things that we can do to improve things. One of those, again, is I think the change in philosophy has to be, how do we use the opportunities that we have to deliver care, as I say, that not only extends the life of our seniors, but also makes the lives of our seniors better. That means making sure they have access to livable communities. I know that for my mom, what was really important was that she needed to be where she could continue to go to the church that she had attended our whole life, that I still attend with her. And so we know that affordable, accessible housing is important. We know that within that environment, different levels, as I say, of care will need to be available to any given resident. Again, retire as a Buckeye will be a help as that, and because it will enable you to access the kinds of programs, the kinds of care that you need. We can use telemedicine in a more significant way in certain times, in certain places, if people are interested in doing that. It can never be a complete substitute for one-on-one care, but there may be ways to some cannot get to where the doctor they need. If the situation is right, we can use some telemedicine options. It may be that if you have a chronic disease that requires, for example, a blood pressure cuff, that maybe you can do that together with your... So there are a myriad of ways that we can improve care while reducing costs. But we have to aim, in my opinion, again, at making sure that our goal is to make people's lives better. Now, some people actually argue, and I heard this when I was in Congress, that when we improve longevity and care, it actually costs more. Well, the truth of the matter is, if we invest on the front end in preventative and primary care, people will have better lives and we will have better outcomes. It will be less costly than if it's only addressed at the end of a disease or an illness. So it really is a change in philosophy. How do we invest on the front end to get better outcomes and better lives for our seniors, and get away from that old idea that this is all about putting it off for another day.
Thank you. And I'm going to preface the next question with just a little bit of a personal story, because I think it's a kind of a way to help everybody think about this. The question is of private financing, and the basic underpinning of the question is the fact that lots of people think that Medicare will pay for our long-term services and supports, and it does not, and I see many nodding heads in the audience, people who have experienced that. And then that means that we often drive people essentially onto Medicaid, which is a publicly funded program. My brother was diagnosed with ALS 3 years ago, and he was fortunate, our family is fortunate enough to have the resources to be able to supplement anything that he might be eligible for, but so few of us are, and so many of us are ultimately dependent on really, the taxpayers. And Betty, you've been talking a lot about front-end intervention. And in essence, that's what this question is about, is how do we do that front-end intervention so that we really have a system that can be financed for everybody, not just those like my brother who can actually afford to do it. So the question is about the financing of long-term services and supports for our growing senior population. I want to make sure that everybody realizes there are these lovely posters around the room that talk about things that we are they're clearing the way so you can see them, but they're things we're facing. And before you leave today, I hope you'll take a look at those. But most long-term services and supports, other than the informal care that's provided by friends and family, are paid for by Medicaid simply because people are not able to afford their services themselves. And it's often been said that Medicaid growth is unsustainable out into the future. And I have to tell you that at one point in my career, I was responsible for Medicaid in Ohio. And at that point in time, it was an $18 billion expenditure, and that grows every single day. So it's a real concern, that sustainability. On the other hand, many people believe that they've worked hard, paid taxes, and they're entitled to long-term care, the same as they're entitled to medical care. So here we are in this kind of conundrum of where do you put your resources and how do you devote those? So do you think it's possible to increase the amount of private financing that Ohioans devote to long-term services and support? And if so, what mechanisms would you recommend to accomplish that goal?
Well, the answer is yes. There are things that we can do to encourage more private financing. We can work with employers in the state to push them to allow for programs within their employment practices that will allow people to save up for this kind of care when it becomes relevant to them in their life. And Ohio, the state of Ohio, which is a big employer, can lead the way. And when we lead the way, we can also lead the way with those who are doing business with the state of Ohio and start to help folks fold in that way and save up more. But the truth is, it's not going to be all about increasing private financing. It's also going to be about making some of the changes that we're talking about right here today. Because if we invest in home health care and enabling people, empowering people to stay in their home longer with the level of care that they need to take care of the things that they face, and whether it's with private caregivers, family caregivers, whether it's with paid caregivers, in-home care is less costly than long-term care. So again, it means we have to invest in building that workforce that will allow folks to stay in their home and have the care they need while also experiencing the dignity and the respect and independence that most of us want and hope for. We also can enhance the program that moves people off of long-term care and transitions them back into alternative options where they can be healthy and successful. Sometimes what happens is people are moved into care, they are there, and that is the end of it. And that isn't right. We have to, we really have to invest. It's more cost effective. Isn't it great that it's more cost effective to invest in the place where most seniors would want to be? and enabling and empowering people to stay in communities that work for them, or in a home as a solo person. And that's why those wraparound services you mentioned in that other question are so important. It's also smart to invest in those, right? To invest in Meals on Wheels, to make sure that folks get what they need to do. It's also smart to make sure that you have elected officials who are going to fight to squeeze the costs out of prescription drugs, which is something that I have done, and frankly look forward to doing some more when we are elected, because there's no group that feels the burdens of cost increases more than seniors do. And so Rich and I are well aware of that. We have seen that in our own lives with our own families. And so there's as I said a moment ago, all of these things are so interrelated. But the whole, really, the magic sauce is in making sure that people have the appropriate options for them at the appropriate time, and we invest in those things on the front end, as I said, not only to get better outcomes in terms of longevity, but also in quality of life. It is a blessing that we are having an increase in the number of Ohioans over 65 years or older.
So.
Right? We know by 2030, 1/4 of our population will be over 65, and that is a blessing. It is also a call to action for all of us in public office, or who aspire to in public office, to change the way that we are focusing on delivering health care and opportunities and for our seniors. So that's what Rich and I are going to do.
We have told our candidates that they can have kind of a 5-minute time here to just add whatever you think might be of particular interest to your audience, remembering there's people out there around the state in watch parties, and so it's not just Central Ohioans that we're talking with, but it's the whole state.
Well, I thank you, and I thank you for this opportunity. I thank you for holding these conversations. I think they're important not just at election time, but also when one is in office. So I hope
we'll be inviting
we will have
the next
more
administration
of these,
back. Yeah.
Okay? Because it really is, it's an ongoing commitment that we need to have if we are going to make the kinds of changes and improvements that I know we can make. So in this moment, if I could just for a second take us back, and I told you a little bit about me along the way, but I grew up in Barberton, Ohio. I don't know if any of you know where Barberton is outside of Akron. And frankly, I am the youngest of 6. My dad was a Boilermaker. My mom worked at the local library. And they worked really hard to put food on the table, and we were able to go to the doctor when we needed to go, and we had enough, and maybe we didn't have as much but I never knew it, right? And they tried to save up to retire with respect and dignity. And I told you a little bit about my mom, and I'm happy to say she's actually living with my sister. She's 90 years old this year, and if for no other reason, we need to win just for my mom. She is very engaged, but that dream of working hard and knowing that things are going to be okay has slipped away. And frankly, we need to refocus on working for people. And our campaign, Rich and our campaign, is really all about putting people first, and that means putting seniors first. I know it sounds like a novel idea, right? I thought that's what government service is all supposed to be about. But and Rich. Rich has served us. He's public servant through and through. He worked as our treasurer, and he fought to preserve the pensions and protect folks who had worked hard throughout their lives to make sure that they could retire with respect and dignity. And then he also served as our Attorney General and to protect us in Washington from some of the greediest institutions in our country who are mistreating and cheating people. And he recovered $12 billion for people and put it back in their pockets. And so I really feel like this conversation is about, And frankly, this election is about who are you willing to stand up for? Who do you stand up for? And who are you willing to stand up against to do it? I brought up that issue about requiring Medicare to negotiate for lower drug prices for our seniors because that's the one that perplexes me the most. Why the government would prohibit itself from negotiating lower drug prices to the benefit of our seniors is beyond me. And there is a difference in this race because Mr. DeWine, our opponent, he actually was on the other side of this issue when he was in the Senate. So I don't know what that is, but I do know this. Rich and I are firmly planted on making sure that we do everything we can, working with leaders who have given in service to our seniors. And with all of you, and bringing together the voices to come up with solutions and new ways forward. That, as I say, we have to do it a new way if we're facing a growing population that we want to keep healthy and vibrant and independent, living with respect and dignity, and contributing to our society because you do. And for that, we continue to be ever grateful. I learn every time I go to our church. Our church is getting older. There are a lot of folks who are getting older in our church. But boy, the things I have learned, they didn't end in Sunday school. They continue through these days. And there's just, we have to find more ways to work collaboratively to achieve that independence, that home, to help more people stay at home, provide more accessible communities for people to stay connected to get the care that they need when they need it, at the level they need it, retire as a Buckeye, happy in Ohio. And Rich and I are totally focused on making this a priority. And I know with your help, we can do it. And so I thank you again very, very much for your help, for your patience, for your time, for all that you have given to help us build this state. And I look forward to talking with you not just now, but hopefully after November 6th, when maybe I'll be able to return as your lieutenant governor.
Join me in thanking.
Thank you.
Betty, thank you so much. Take care. As I mentioned earlier, we're asking you to stay seated. We do have a couple, I'm trying to make sure that I don't drag my things, that I'm not attached to something. We have a person. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves, but they're going to give us a couple minutes here to stretch and feel better. And then we will have a short film, and then our second candidate will be with us. So welcome and thank you. I'm going to slide down here.
My name is Karen Peters. I'm 74 years old. One day I said to my husband, I thought you were going to build me a little house with a little yard. And he said, I thought you always wanted to move to German Village. So I started looking right then. Of course, I could get around a lot better then. I could walk. When I wake up in the morning every day, the first thing I do is turn my stimulator on. If I just had the one problem, the essential tremor, that would really sort of fix things. But unfortunately, I have Charcot-Marie-Tooth, which is the muscular dystrophy family, and it affects your muscles and your coordination and your balance. So it doesn't really, they don't have anything for that. When we first moved here, I could walk to the city center and back, believe it or not. I keep telling the doctor I need a brain implant. he thinks that's funny. Let's see, my day is pretty hard. Anything I do. But I'm so used to it. I'm trying to think of the hardest part. This has happened to me slowly. So I have been able to adapt my house to my challenges. Brush my teeth and all that, put deodorant on and all that, and I can see I can do everything here, sort of. And then the other thing, I guess, is thinking about if this keeps getting worse, what's next? You can't imagine this, but almost every person's house has steps of some kind. So I have to really know where I'm going and know that there's going to be somebody there to help me in and out. So I guess if I'm going someplace new, I kind of think about that. But now when I go out on my cart, really, I'm pretty relaxed.
Chocolate, don't wait up, I'll stay out late. Just because I want to, you can't tell me to wait now. I whistle for a waiter. I'm about to spend my paper. See you later, alligator.
I'm getting my exercise today, that's for
There you
sure.
go.
Here we are. You can just bring those right over here on the desk because we got to list them. Thank you. I do a lot of social things. I like to go out by myself sometimes because I can go on my own time. And there are a lot of restaurants here that I can get in and out of. Getting around on the mobility cart, you have to be really cautious of what routes you use. I go through here. I don't think I can get through though. I think it's too tight. When I'm going to cross the streets at different intersections, I never go when they're on the countdown. I always wait till the beginning of the light change, so I have plenty of time. I think Columbus does pretty good, except the curb cuts. If I have a railing to hold on, I can get up steps if I can hold on really good. But in German Village, that just does not happen. The biggest thing is the restrooms. Whoever puts the bars up in the restrooms don't have a clue what you need, where. So I don't really think anybody could understand unless they've been around somebody. When they see somebody that's, hard to get around. But I don't really feel like I'm in my 70s.
We're, the few last-minute technical adjustments here. Our second candidate is here, and we are, as soon as I grab my notes, we are going to welcome the Republican Lieutenant Governor's candidate, Secretary of State John Husted. He has served the last 8 years as Ohio's Secretary of State. He was previously a member of the Ohio House, where he was elected Speaker. Secretary Husted was raised in Northwest Ohio, holds a bachelor's and a master's degree from the University of Dayton, and he and his wife have 3 children ranging in age from 7 to 21. So allow me to help me to welcome Secretary of State John Husted. And
How are you?
thank you so much. Very good.
Great.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We are eager to hear what you and your running mate are thinking about in relation to aging issues. And we'd like to start with just giving you a few moments to acquaint us with you. I did a bare minimum introduction.
Yeah,
so.
well, sure. I'm first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Mike DeWine and I both appreciate that. He's actually on his way to Youngstown right now, and we did an announcement earlier this morning on Innovate Ohio, which I'll maybe touch on a little bit later, but really it's about how we use technology to improve state government and deliver better customer services at lower prices, which is something that I have been trying to do, in the Office of Secretary of State. We've become so efficient in our office that we no longer need any tax dollars to run it. So, and I'm not joking, we run it completely on fees, and we cut the fees by 21%. We have almost 40% fewer people working there today than we did when I started, mostly through attrition and early retirements, and we have improved customer service and driven down costs, and so we don't need tax dollars anymore. And I don't know that there's anybody ever in state government that's ever said, that they need tax dollars to run themselves. And so we're really pleased with that. And I think it speaks to the larger issue of where we want to go with a lot of things. But give you a little personal insight, kind of what, so that you know who I am. I started out life in a foster home in Detroit, Michigan, and thanks to the grace of God, I was adopted by 2 wonderful parents, Jim and Judy Husted, and they raised me in a small town of Montpelier, Ohio, which is about 4,000 people, and I was actually there yesterday. You don't get, now, how many even know where Montpelier, Ohio is? The house I grew up in, to put it in perspective, was 8 miles from Indiana and 9 from Michigan. So we had the corner defended against Indiana and Michigan. And I went back home, and I went to the Williams County Fair yesterday. And I had a pork sandwich, the same pork producer's pork sandwich when I was in high school, and I used to go there at lunch during high school. Put my mustard and my horseradish on the sausage sandwich, and ate it, and it tasted just as good as it did then, but it cost $2.50 more than when I had it then. So it was the difference. But I was blessed with wonderful parents who I always tell my dad, I said, I hit the lottery when I got you and Mom. And he always says, well, no money came with it. My dad's 80, she's 79, so we're experiencing firsthand a lot of the issues that come with aging. And as I look at Ohio from the standpoint of where we are as a state, in preparation for today, you ever heard the term demographics is destiny? All right, I always thought that was a real estate term, about how valuable your real estate would be. But it's actually, I actually did a little research on this. It actually was a French term that came in the 1800s. It's that old. Demographics is destiny. You wouldn't think that they were worried too much about demographics at that phase in our history, but they certainly were then, and it's true now. And in 2010, I don't know if you know this, but in Ohio, we only had one county where 30% of the population was 60 years of age or older. So in 2010, we only had one county. By 2020, 14 of them, 14 states will have counties with people who 30% of the population is 30 or is 60 years of age or older. And by 2030, it will be 57 counties. That just shows you how the demographics are changing. And if you see it, though, if you see where this map is, where it lights up on this, you see the regions are largely rural, where this is happening the most. And I can tell you from traveling around Ohio, a lot of people retire in rural communities because of lower property taxes, lower cost of real estate. And so you have a demographic shift to the rural areas for a lot of that population. And guess who doesn't live in the rural areas? The younger people and doctors and caregivers.
Exactly.
Who you need to serve that population. So that brings in, and these things are all affected by affluence and poverty. They're affected by the demographics and who lives there and whether or not the facilities are there or whether you have access to the transportation you need. Also, local support and state support financially are affected by those issues. And we're going to have to be innovative, creative, collaborative, and looking for all kinds of solutions to these issues as it relates to long-term care, assisted living, in-home care, and the dynamics around that. And Mike DeWine and I have a lot of ideas about what we want to do for the future of Ohio. Everything from, it is literally, when you're in public service, it's everything from cradle to grave. And frankly, with our kids' agenda, it's even before they're born, because we know that the brain science tells us that kids that are exposed to drugs or smoking or adverse conditions, health conditions, even when they're in the womb, are affected. And so you have to do a great job at helping educate mothers on how to create healthier environments for those children, all the way through elder care, and how we can use things like technology to improve healthcare services, to create the connectivity that you need. And it's exciting. It's exciting when you have the opportunity to try to impact the outcome of these issues and make things better. So that's kind of my background and
Excellent.
some of the things that we care about and some of the things that are on my mind. And so I know you have lots of questions.
We have questions for you.
So let's get to them.
And I think you've actually set up the first one in some respects quite nicely. It's regarding workforce, and you talked some about those demographics, and those demographics are part of what is at work in relation to our workforce. But what we're really talking about here are the paid caregivers for seniors and those folks with disabilities. Mm-hmm. It's well documented that we have a shortage of paid caregivers today. We certainly have an economy that's drawing a number of those persons who have been paid as caregivers into other arenas. And so that number continues to fall. It's also equally well documented that in coming years, we will have fewer paid caregivers and more people needing that care. You referenced that chart from Miami University that lays that out beautifully.
It is. It's a great resource.
It is. What ideas do you have to address that challenge by, for example, encouraging Ohioans to make caregiving their career or harnessing technology to relieve the caregiving workload?
All of the above certainly are going to have to be on the list of to-dos. I know that my wife is a physical therapist by training, an Ohio University graduate, and she did everything from institutional care to home care. And I know that it's constantly a challenge to try to find, whether it's anybody from people who are more highly trained as physical therapists or to professions in the healthcare field who are less trained. It's across the board. There's a need for everybody. But technology cannot replace the human touch. It's as much as we can talk about using technology to improve the way that we do things, you need a real person. You need a real person because machines may be obedient, but they're not as compassionate, and they're not as intuitive as technology is in the world. However, I think technology has a component of our future can help with this, and this is why. I think that a lot of jobs in some sectors of the economy will become more highly automated. There are some things that machines are really good at and some aren't. And so the opportunity is that maybe as fewer of those jobs or as opportunities in the workplace change, that we can retrain people who are leaving different kinds of professions and reaching them and helping them get the training that you need to go into the healthcare field in everything from long-term to home care and everything that is between that. So I think putting money into retraining, putting money into training, and also, let's face it, jobs are part of the economy. And if you're going to pay somebody a lot to do this job and little to do this job, you're going to get more people wanting to do this and not as many people wanting to do this. So we're going to have to maintain the financial wherewithal and the financial stability. And that requires that your economy grow, that you take the cost out of things that don't need to cost as much, like my office. Why do we need to spend so much money on bureaucracy and form processing when we can take that savings and then put it out into services that touch real people's lives? And so that's what I believe that technology will allow us to do. That's what I believe that the savings and the efficiencies that we get from some parts of government can be invested in other parts of government to make sure that we're recruiting, we're training, we're appropriately paying. But one last thing that I do know on this front of products that I've seen, because I'm really interested in how technology can improve people's lives from a healthcare point of view. Wellness is incredibly important. If we're going to drive down healthcare costs, we have to find a way to get better outcomes within our healthcare system to help people stay healthier. And I know that one piece of long-term care technology that I have been exposed to are devices that help detect whether somebody is dehydrated, devices that help detect whether or not they need to be moved, whether they need changing. They need all kinds of things that are out there that help prevent infections, that help prevent trips to the hospital, all of those kinds of things where we can use technology to help people stay healthier, to reduce the use of the costly side of care, and to make things better and more efficient for the people in their daily lives.
Thank you. And the next question is related to the first. This is regarding provider capacity, which goes beyond the actual workforce, hands-on folks. This is pertaining to options for care. Mm-hmm. As we age, we're likely to need more help to continue living life the best we can. We will talk about some family caregiving, but right now, as more Ohioans age and/or develop disabilities, and many of us need services, we also may need formal long-term services and supports. How would you suggest that the state build, fund, and maintain a full array of high-quality options for care so the seniors have the ability to choose services that will meet their needs in the most cost-effective manner. And I know from my conversations with seniors, choice tends to be a big piece of what we are concerned about and care about.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and everybody likes to have choice.
Yeah.
we all like to have choices. We all like to have options. And I know that during the time that I was in the legislature, we worked a lot on those issues, expanding home care. People don't, you know, I know from my own family's experience, people, you know, my mom and dad, my grandparents, everybody, they wanted to be at home as long as they could. And they like to have their independence as much as they can. And we certainly need to build, look, you work with the area agencies on aging, you find out, you work at the state level, you find out where the needs are in every community, and you work with your local collaborators to make sure that those are available. And they're not just going to happen on their own, though. You have to have a plan. Every county has to have a plan. That plan has to be coordinated at the state level. Resources need to be brought to bear to make sure that we are executing that, whether it is within the family, whether it is part-time, full-time, intermediate, institutional, assisted living, you know, and all of the above. All the above strategy on this is the way that you give people choice, and you build communities of care around them so that choice is quality choice.
Thank you. The next question pertains to that informal caregiving that we've referenced in terms of friends, family, particularly family, providing that care. An estimated 1.4 million Ohioans provide unpaid care to their parents, their spouses, or other loved ones. The value of the unpaid care in Ohio alone is estimated at $16.5 billion a year. Informal caregivers are our hidden gems, and there's no doubt about that. We don't necessarily have the data on informal caregivers as we do on paid caregivers, because it's informal. It's just out there in the world we're living in. But we do know that they're critically important. With our growing aging population, what thoughts do you have about how we can support those informal caregivers and families who are providing really the majority of care?
The informal caregivers are the gems because they tend to know the people that they're caring for the best. They know, they have those built-in relationships, the family network, which is so very important. And I worry on the demographic shift on this, because as we've had more family breakdown, as we have more populations that are moving around, particularly with children and people like that, where the families are no longer in the same communities like they have been in our past, that this is going to be a difficult thing to sustain at the level that I think we wish we had it. And so I think that certain incentives that you can give, one of the things that Mike DeWine and I discussed about was looking at a caregiver tax credit for individuals. Anything that you can do to create an incentive for a family member to provide the care, I think you're going to get better care, and you're going to do it at a lower price than you would through other options. So to the extent that we can create connectivity, that we can create incentives financially to help more informal caregivers be involved in the lives of their loved ones, I think the better off we'll all be.
Thank you. The next one is on protection for seniors. As we know, we also have seniors who end up subjected to abuse, neglect. Sometimes it's self-neglect, certainly on occasion, fraudulent activities that occur. And it's been really a wonderful thing that we've been able to devote some additional resources in Ohio to that adult abuse and neglect facet of things. But we also know that as more Ohioans age and that the percentage of individuals with dementia increases, there there will be more instances of abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The number of incidents is highly likely to increase. What measures do you feel are needed to expand our protection efforts, such as through adult protective services or other resources?
Yeah, this is one I have to admit that Mike DeWine is the expert on this one, not me. As Attorney General, he's worked very hard on all of these issues, and I made a few notes here. He fought to protect older Ohioans from elder abuse and neglect during the time that he's been Attorney General. Since 2011, he's secured over 1,000 indictments and nearly 1,000 convictions and recovered more than $386 million on this front over Medicaid fraud alone. I mean, that's a stunning number of fraud, the stunning number of people involved in it. And when that happens, it undermines care. It undermines confidence in the system. And so making sure that we hold people accountable on this, and through his division of Medicaid, they've also looked into allegations on patient abuse and neglect in long-term care facilities, and I know that there have been prosecutions there as well. He launched the Elder Justice Initiative to increase the investigation and prosecution of elder abuse cases to improve victims' access to services, and the office's Crime Victim Services section spearheaded an initiative on this front too, which also draws on the resources from the Attorney General's Bureau of Criminal Investigation and Consumer Protection, Health Care Fraud, and Special Prosecutions Division. And so he's got a lot of background on this. He knows the issue well. And as I asked him about this, he talked about why it's important to do this, because one of the things we talked about in this realm is that we want to do a better job in county government, in supporting county government, particularly in areas like foster care and things like that, because counties' resources are being spread thin, and particularly in some of those rural counties at this, because all this fits together. I'm going to talk about how all of it fits together. In a lot of counties, particularly our rural counties, where there's a bad opioid addiction problem, more than half the kids in foster care have a parent who's addicted. That's why they got there. And when you spread those resources too thin on that side of things, then you don't have the resources and the manpower to look in other areas of abuse, like in elder care. And so we're going to help boost the foster care system as well. And those two fit really. Want to take advantage of people in vulnerable situations, and they need to know that we are not going to tolerate it. Mike DeWine has not tolerated it as Attorney General and will not tolerate it as Governor.
Thank you. Our next question deals with dementia, and much as we've been talking about how the increase in the number of aging individuals equates to increases in things like adult protective service needs, et cetera, it clearly is leading to an increase in the occurrence of dementia and Alzheimer's among older adults. Certainly, we hope that there will be medical advances with the potential for either preventing or reversing Alzheimer's and dementia. But until then, here we are. And I have to say that it's interesting to me that when we talk about dementia, more and more it's touching the individuals we talk with. And so that, I think that's driving individuals. But in addition to that, there's the potential to support individuals and their caregivers that have a dementia diagnosis.
I think you're absolutely right. First of all, there's almost nobody that you can talk with who hasn't been touched by this. I know that we have been personally in our extended family with very close friends, with neighbors in our community. I think creating awareness is incredibly important because we have an individual in our own neighborhood who suffers from dementia. And so we're always keeping a watchful eye on her when we see her out, because we know her husband he's getting older too, and he can't provide the oversight that he once could. And the strongest people and the best intentioned people who want to try to help sometimes can be overwhelmed by it. And it's such a cruel disease, because you see these people that were just fantastic, that could do it all, that were strong, that were were the leaders in their families, neighborhoods, communities, and you just see them slowly lose the ability to not only do that, but to take care of themselves. And then they have happen without their knowing it, something that I know none of us ever want to be, is a burden on somebody else. If any of you saw the 60 Minutes segment on this, it was heartbreaking, because it was about this man whose wife had developed dementia, and I think it was a long-term view of this. I think they looked at it over a 10-year period. And when it started, he said, look, she always took care of me, and now I'm going to take care of her. And he put that on his shoulders, and he was going to do it, and he was that he loved and who took care of him his whole life. Support services for those families, institutions of care in those areas that have expertise in this area, must be continued to be made available and extended into communities where this is going to be difficult. Because there's some really great places that do amazing work in this, but they're isolated. They're not in every community, in every place. And let's hope, with innovation and brain science research, to occur right here in Ohio, so that hopefully.
And really, as we've talked through all of these issues, I'm not 100% certain how this story fits exactly into the questions, but I think you'll understand as I go. I stood in this room probably 10 years ago and was addressing a group of individuals who live here at Westminster Thurber, and they lived in independent living. Some of them were in the assisted living area. A few were in skilled nursing. And I was talking to them about the ability to age in place, to age at home. And one of the gentlemen reminded me that this was his home, and he was one that was in the skilled care facility. And I think, as we talk about all of these issues, it's really important for us to recognize it kind of circles back to that choice issue of it's the place I call home. It may not be your definition of home, but it
right.
may be my definition of home. And our next question deals with care coordination, which also circles back into that choice-related issue. Over the course of the last maybe decade or so, things like managing your care, coordinating your care, putting together the hospital visit, the primary care doc visit, and the home health aide visit have been seen as a way to really improve care and improve outcomes for individuals. And in Ohio, we've had a group of people who receive both Medicare and Medicaid moved into managed care with the goal of making sure that we were coordinating the care of all those individuals. And we have more recently, during the last, not sure that really was the best, and not so much the best, but asking the state to study that more deeply before just moving forward. And the state has indeed convened a work group that includes advocates, not only members of the General Assembly. So it's the General Assembly that convened that work group. So I'd like to talk a little more about that, because that's clearly on the agenda as we move forward, and the next governor and lieutenant governor will probably have to face the decision-making around all of that. So what ideas do you have about how our system could better manage the care of those of us who are seniors, but without limiting our choice of providers or our access to necessary services? And those necessary services go well beyond the traditional thought of managed care. They include transportation, they include social services, they include the ability not just to get to my doctor, but to get to my church service on Sunday. So talk to us about how you would envision that moving forward.
Well, you kind of answered the question.
Wonderful.
In your asking of the question, because I know that every administration that and every General Assembly that I have watched on this, from the Taft administration to the Strickland administration to the Kasich administration, has been trying to grapple with this. How do you continue to increase care and choice and option, the options that people want, and do it in a way that makes it affordable, particularly as you have more customers, more consumers of these services as the demographics shift in our state. And so we have this next budget process, which we absolutely that in every aspect of our economy, the way that you drive down cost is with technology and improving the way that you coordinate services through that technology, the way that you can use the data to get at individualized care and more coordinated care, where you can have people with specializations who understand your issues uniquely and can improve the quality of the services that are being provided. And that goes from everything from remote monitoring services to scheduling transportation, to the way that we handle things from prescription drugs to doctor's appointments and things like that. And all of that we're just going to continue to try to use those tools to improve the way that we deliver the services and keep our promise to all of the elderly Ohioans who have paid taxes their whole life and have earned their fair share of these services to be done in a quality way.
Thank you. Our last question deals with financing. Some of us are privileged enough and blessed enough to be able to afford to finance our own long-term services and supports. Some of us are the other end of the spectrum and have had so much of a draw on our income that we end up reliant on Medicaid for our services. An awful lot of folks, particularly as they're entering the need for long-term services, believe that Medicare will pay for it, which unfortunately is not at all the case. And there are a lot of folks who are concerned about the movement into Medicaid because that unsustainable growth of Medicaid is a reality. We cannot just keep growing Medicaid, and we cannot allow our seniors who need care to bankrupt themselves and then become dependent on Medicaid. So for that reason, many people have worked hard and paid their taxes, and some believe that we're entitled to our long-term care, the same as we're entitled to Medicare or to medical care. But do you think it's possible to increase the amount of private financing, that ability to pay for your own care, that Ohioans are able to devote to long-term services of supports, and how would you propose we do that?
Well, that's quite a problem. As you've astutely noted, the demographic shifts, the fact that we are growing to have more tax consumers than we have the taxpayers to support it, and how we make these things work in a way that allow respect the people who are in the system. This is also going on at a time where people are living longer. The savings that they have maybe isn't enough, and I don't know that we have, as a nation, focused enough on the private side of financing it and giving the proper incentives for the purchase of long-term care insurance and things along those lines. I think the statistic I saw that only 4% of people have it. Well, certainly that's not enough. There are plenty more Americans who should be in that category. I know that some states have done 529 type plans to try to create incentives for long-term care insurance. I think that, but I do believe that in all of our healthcare system, not with just seniors, that we have to do a better job of getting better outcomes, doing a better job with wellness, doing a better job at preventative care, on all of those kinds of things to take the cost out of it. We know this. We know this about our healthcare system. 70% of our healthcare costs are for treating things that were preventable. So it's focusing better outcomes in that 70% so that we have the resources to treat the 30% that's not preventable. It's math. It's also improving the quality of people's lives. It's creating the right kind of incentives for doing this. We embraced a plan that's come out of the Cleveland Clinic. We announced a plan, a wellness plan, that the Cleveland Clinic has been doing with their employees that has improved healthcare outcomes, so they have healthier people living a higher quality of life, who are more productive, and at the same time, it's reduced their costs by hundreds of millions of dollars. It's not the only solution to this, but it's an important solution to this because you can promise to spend more. You always hear this every election. People are going to promise to spend more, but we have to do it in a way that is sustainable, that respects our children and grandchildren, because we don't want to leave the burden on them either. So we have to find ways to drive better outcomes so that we can give choices. Because look, here's the thing: you want choices. We want healthier. We want a healthier life. We want sustainability to all this, and so it's coordination, it's innovation, it's the collaborations between institutions, it's planning for both private long-term care and a public system that's sustainable. These are the elements of all of this that we come back to when you really get to the end of it. And I know when you're 21, sustainability is really important. And when you're 81, what I need when I need it's really important. And so it's respecting all of those audiences is what we have to do as public servants. And that's what we fully intend to do. We fully intend to help make sure kids get healthier starts in life so that they can read by the third grade, so that they can graduate high school, either career or college ready, so they can go out and get a good job, that they can buy a house and raise a family and fund their kids' education and save for their retirement, and be able to live the twilight years of their life with dignity and know that they left the world better than they found it. That's what the American dream is about. That's what we all hope for our lives and for our communities, and it's our job to try to continue to make this giant system of government change to reflect what people want it to do. So,
I think you have probably bridged into that last, which was, is there something you would like to kind of add to cap it off? You may have just done that with what you've said.
I think I hit those points, but we want an Ohio that works for everyone. It's not an Ohio that just works for some people. It's an Ohio that works for everyone. And no matter where you grew up, whether you were an adopted kid that grew up in a small town like me, or you're a kid that grew up in a tough neighborhood in the inner city, we want you to have hope. We want you to have opportunity. And whether you've got your family here in the community that you live in, that you can rely on a day in, day out basis, where family care is the right solution for you as you age, well, we want that, if that works for you. If staying at home and having home care is the right solution, either part-time or full-time care, then we want to try to find ways to do that. assisted living, long-term care, making sure that our institutional care is of the highest quality and the sustainable in the way it's made up. It's all of those things. And we want a more hopeful, prosperous America for everyone. And we are going to waste no time in trying to get started to get that done. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Join me in thanking. Thanks so much. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
Now, I know that you may have felt, as I did, a little frustrated because we had our structure where we were only asking those set questions, and we did give you those cards at the beginning. We will be submitting any questions you might have to the candidates, each of their offices, and ask for any responses. So as you pass out either of the doors, I'm going to ask that we have lots of volunteers helping us today. I'm going to ask one of the volunteers to be there. Before you go, I want to thank you all for being here. I think this was a beginning, not an ending. I loved the suggestion that we invite whoever ends up being governor and lieutenant governor back to talk with us so that we can hear how they plan to implement these wonderful ideas. I mentioned at the beginning, this is the Ohio Aging Advocacy Coalition. We are not a formal organization where you pay money to join and sign up. Right now, we are focused on basically our Facebook page. You can learn all about us there. If you don't use Facebook, I'm sure you have a friend that does, that you can tap into. And if you're interested in being more actively involved, we will be posting things like action alerts there. So that you'll know that a piece of legislation is pending and we need to get out and speak about it. We're also looking for a few more people who might be willing to serve on an advisory group so that we can build our that stance on issues, that we have lots of input into what stance we are going to take on issues. And so if you might be interested in participating in that way, you could just jot that down on that card as well. But please do follow and like our Facebook page. That's what allows us to be able to talk to persons like we have today and say, hey, look, we represent a lot of people. This isn't just 4 or 5 individuals who care. This is thousands and thousands and thousands of people who care. So I ask you to do that, and thank you so much for being with us today. And stay tuned. Lots of good things will come.